As you're coming in, everything on your desk should be put away other than a pencil. You're not going to need binders or books today, just a pencil in your packet. All right? I don't want to see any. Alright, so guys, I don't want to see anything else on your desk other than your pencils and your packets, alright? Books, anything else. Water bottles are okay, but laptops are away, binders are away. Alright? Cool. Are you guys excited for Valentine's Day?
Yes.
No? Why not? Do you not like Valentine's Day?
I do.
Oh, well, I think I told some of you. Valentine's Day is like my fourth favorite holiday. And so because of that, I'm going to wear pink all week long. And nobody can stop me. That's what I'm going to do. I'm sorry if you don't like pink.
Your shoes are mine.
Don't tell anyone. I'll dye in pink or something. Yeah. So I'm really excited for Valentine's Day. But not a lot of you guys. I see like 2 pink. 3. Sophia's kind of has pink on her sweater. Well, anyway, I'm really excited. We're going to talk about romanticism today, but it's not like super lovey-dovey. So it doesn't correlate at all with Valentine's Day. But together, I want everyone to look at the board or at the TV, and I want to read you our clear learning target for the day. It says, I will be able to identify Edgar Allan Poe and explain how his life impacted his tone in his writing. All right, so as we're going through the next couple of minutes, think a lot about the tone, and we'll talk about his life afterwards, so we might be able to correlate the two by the end of class. But we are going to start with something I know you guys like, which is a video. Yay!
Evil, prophet still in
Oh
burden.
no! I promise that'll make sense when you get to it.
Once upon a midnight dreary,
Guys, you
in
should be
while I
talking.
pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, for vainly had I sought to borrow from my books a surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently, my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is, I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you." Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, Lenore. This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, Lenore. Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. Surely, said I, surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, when with many flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven, of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door. Perched upon a bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore, though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore, tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Much I marvel this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy for we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such name as Nevermore. But the raven still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird, and bust, and door. Then upon the velvet sinking I betook myself to linking, fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking, nevermore. Then methought, the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul, with sorrow laden, if within the distant Eden it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting, get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting, on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore.
Nevermore. Kind of eerie at the end, isn't it? Right. Back to the slides again. Okay. There we go. All right. So that is called The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, and I think inarguably, so without a doubt, that is his most famous poem. If you ever hear the name Edgar Allan Poe, The Raven is almost always associated with it. It is his most famous work. We're not talking about this poem, but for you to kind of understand his vibe or his tone, I think it was important to watch that, because that is, you know, if you want to talk about Edgar Allan Poe, it's The Raven. It is the quintessence of who Edgar Allan Poe was. So, the Raven is, I have seen references to the Raven and Edgar Allan Poe in most movies and TV shows, and even like while scrolling on Instagram and TikTok, I see references to him and the Raven and his other poems all the time. Sometimes it'll be like when you don't even realize that they're quoting or referencing Edgar Allan Poe, but it is all around you. So basically, Edgar Allan Poe is one of the most important American authors, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that today as to why he's one of the most important. But something very, very notable about Edgar Allan Poe is his tone, which is very unique, very distinct. What was the tone of this poem? Raise your hand and answer. If you want, I might call on you. Yeah, Timothy. Scary? Yeah, very good. What else? Yeah, Ben. Eerie, very good. Scary, eerie, yeah.
It was like dark, but you could also tell that maybe it was written like longer back then because of the wording in it.
Yeah, that's something that I knew while we were watching this. This vocab, I don't understand a lot of these words, and I've studied this poem multiple times. Like, what does quaff mean? I have no idea. It's a funny word. I don't know the definition, but yeah, exactly. So we have like dark, eerie, scary, kind of elevated. Would you say like the vocabulary is older English? Yeah? What else? I saw another hand. Do you have your hand up? No? Okay. Yeah, Michael. Serious. Yeah, very good. These are all perfect examples of the tone of Edgar Allan Poe. So that's just something to keep in mind as we go over his life and how his life unfolded, and also some of his works to keep in mind, because his life did impact the way that he wrote. And hopefully we're gonna figure out why. So I was scrolling on Instagram a couple of years ago, and something caught my eye, and I thought it was one of the funniest things in the world, but I'm a big like book nerd, so you guys might not think it's funny, but I'm gonna show you anyways and hope that you think it's funny. It says, "Suddenly there came a swagging as of someone gangster rapping at my chamber door. Quoth the Raven, swag galore." No laughs. No. The audience is silent.
Got it.
That's kind of funny. I think so. That'll be on Google Classroom if anyone wants to steal it. Alright, so we're going to talk about his life now. Edgar Allan Poe, you guys have seen his pictures, you were coming in. Do you guys think he's a handsome gentleman? No! What? The other block thought so too. Or they didn't think so, I guess. I think he has a nice little comb over the mustache. Alright, so he has a very interesting life, but it started on January 19, 1809. He was born to two parents who were actors. Shortly after his birth, his father left his mother. And then before he was 3, his mother had died, as well as his father. Even though his father wasn't in his life, he had also passed away before he was 3 years old. He was adopted by foster parents, Mr. and Mrs. John Allen, which is why he has 2 last names, Edgar Allan Poe. A lot of times people just call him Poe, but he does have those 2 last names to honor both his mother and also his foster adopted parents. So over here is his mother, Elizabeth Poe, who seems to be a very beautiful woman. Do you guys see any resemblance? Timothy's do you guys see any resemblance between her and Edgar from the last slide? Not so much. Portraits weren't super great back then, so that's probably not what she actually looked like. But these are his adopted parents, John and Mrs. Allen. So, a quick summary of his early life. In 1815, when he was 6 or 7 years old, he went off to go to school in England to learn about literature and sciences and all the good things England has to offer. And then in 1826, he attended the University of Virginia. But he dropped out a year after he got there because his adopted father wouldn't pay his expenses, which is a very fancy way of saying that Edgar Allan Poe had a gambling problem, and when his adopted father gave him rent for food and for like rent money for rent and food, he would spend it gambling. And so his adopted father was like, no more, you're done, you're cut off. And because of that, because he didn't have any more money, he dropped out, which prompted his enlistment in the United States Army. Which, there's not a lot on Edgar Allan Poe during his time in the Army, but that's usually a good thing. No news is good news. So he served, nothing really to know. This is a nice picture of him in his military outfit looking very handsome. Maybe? No? Still no? Huh. Not even the uniform does it? That's okay. Alright, this is when things start to pick up. In 1835, Poe becomes the editor of the Southern Literary Messenger and moves to Richmond, Virginia, where he moves in with his aunt and his cousin Virginia. 2 years after he moved there, when Poe was 27 years old, he gets married to his cousin, Virginia, who was 13 years old. Yeah, so let that say. Do we have any 13-year-olds in here? No 13-year-olds? You're 13. Are you?
You're not.
But 13 is very, you guys are 12, right? 11 and 12? So you guys are very close to Virginia's age when she got married. You think you guys are ready for marriage?
No.
Yeah. We'll get married on Valentine's Day. No? So yeah, it seems kind of wild now. Like, yeah, Poe married his cousin who was 13 and he was 27. But back then, that was pretty normal. That was something that happened quite often. And so now looking back, it's like, ooh, we probably wouldn't support that now. But back then it was like, well, it is what it is. And despite the age difference, it was a happy marriage. They did love each other. Yeah. So over the next 10 years after they got married, they moved to New York City, where he was an editor for many literary journals. And it's where he published, during this time, some of his most famous works. So The Raven was published during this time, as well as a couple of others that we're going to discuss in a few minutes. So, in 1845, he publishes The Raven, but in 1847, Virginia dies of tuberculosis. Now, tuberculosis is a word that we don't hear too often, but it is a lung and respiratory disease that it was more prevalent back then, but it has, for some reason, made a reemergence here in the past couple of years. So she died of a lung disease, and over the couple of hundred years since Poe has died, he has been the case study for many doctors and many literary professionals, people who study literature, and they have concluded many things about this man. Some of them think he was schizophrenic. Some people think that he was bipolar. But something that most everybody who studies Edgar Allan Poe can agree on is that he was very depressed and that he struggled with alcoholism. And so after his wife died, she was 23 when she died, so she was still pretty young. After she died, his depression and his alcoholism got a lot worse because he was sad, he was grieving. He did love her, but he did return briefly to Richmond, Virginia, before setting out to an editing job in Philadelphia, which is when things start to get weird. So on September 30, 1849, Poe apparently gets on the wrong train and goes to Baltimore. It says apparently because we don't know why he got on the train, if there was purpose behind that decision, or if it really was just an accident. So apparently he accidentally got on the wrong train. In October 3, just a few days later, Poe is found half conscious and is taken to the hospital. And then just 4 days later, Poe dies, October 7, 1849. So there's a lot of conspiracy theories around why Poe died. A very commonly held belief is that he died because of his alcoholism. Either his liver goes out or he just drank himself into unconsciousness. There's also some other kinds of theories, which is like he was involved in some organized crime activities and they kind of found him and like beat him up pretty bad. And so there's a big rabbit hole that you can go down talking about the death of Edgar Allan Poe. Something that though I think everyone can agree on is that he lived his life in a very unusual way. He was a very unusual man. Those words that you guys described the poem, The Raven, with, that is kind of how he lived his life. It was kind of mysterious, kind of weird, sometimes a little eerie. His life is a lot more complex than what I just shared with you, and it seems like everywhere you turn in his story, there's just like another thing that's like, that's unusual. And so a lot of people are of course very sad that he died in the way that he did, but it was almost like a fitting end. This was a very mysterious man who died in a very mysterious way. Almost like something out of one of the stories he wrote. So up here is his grave, which I believe is in Boston. I would need to fact check that to be super sure on it, but I do believe it's in Boston. And then here we have an illustration of the raven, and it says nevermore up there. All right. So we've already kind of talked about the tone of Poe with the raven, but this is a good summary of a tone of all of his works. So it says, Poe uses words such as bleak, haunted, ghastly, and grim to create an atmosphere of sadness. Who can tell me what bleak means? When you think bleak, what comes to mind? Yeah, Chloe. Say it again? Eerie. Eerie, yeah. Anyone else wanna give it a shot? That's correct, yeah. So it means dreary, something that's inhospitable, right? So when you wake up and you look outside and maybe it's a Sunday, so you're supposed to have a good day, but it's just gray and dark. And it's like the kind of day that you just want to wear your sweatpants and stay in your bedroom and not talk to anyone. That is a bleak kind of day. That's kind of something associated with that word bleak. It's just inhospitable, dreary, kind of down. What about ghastly? Ghastly. Say something is ghastly. What does that mean? Timothy.
Like something that has a problem with the sun.
Say it one more time.
Like something that has a problem with the sun.
Yeah.
Something that is bad.
Close. Not quite. Try and associate it with the words around it. Bleak, haunted, grim. Jesse, you want to take a guess at it?
Scary.
Scary? Yeah. I'd say that's very close. It's something that invokes a sense of like horror or being scared. So it's like if you see maybe like a deformed dog that's like missing like a leg, you're like, oh, that's a ghastly dog. Hopefully you don't react like that to just like a normal dog. But if something is a little disformed or looks kind of scared, you're like, oh, that thing is ghastly. So yeah, those words are a good description of the tone of Poe. So he uses those kind of words to create an atmosphere of sadness. The words and tone become increasingly depressing and intense as the narrator descends into misery, underscoring the evolution of the narrator's thoughts and feelings, which can often align with how Poe felt at the time of the authorship. So something kind of interesting about Poe's work that is present in a lot of his writing is that the stories begin, the poems or the stories begin with a normal situation. Like the raven, the guy was just in his room, right? And then all of a sudden this wild thing happens when the raven comes in and starts talking to him. But it kind of starts normal. Like the guy's just going to sleep. There's another story where it starts with a guy and he's just riding his horse through the woods. And he happens upon a house that ends up being awful, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the whole point of a lot of Poe stories is to kind of track the narrator's fall into like misery or like craziness or sadness, which is something prevalent in a lot of the stories. And then also it ties very closely to how Poe was doing at the time that he wrote it. So a lot of his pieces that he wrote after his wife died are a lot sadder and a lot darker than the ones beforehand. They're all kind of dark and dreary, but the ones after his wife died are a little bit more intense because he was sadder. He was going through more. So have you guys discussed what, I know there's a lot going on up here, what genres for books are? You guys know what like book genres are? Yeah? So this is basically a genre or a category of literature. It's called dark romanticism. And it is in direct contrast to romanticism, which think like Disney's Cinderella, where it's like everything is happy and I'm in love and nothing can go wrong and Prince Charming is perfect. It's in contrast to that, right? So it's called dark romanticism, which is something that we probably won't, see a lot on Valentine's Day, right? We're seeing more of like the Cinderella type love, but this is a type of writing. It was very popular in the 19th century, which was the 1800s, and it is an ideology that humans gravitate towards evil and self-destruction. Who can tell me what ideology is? What's an ideology? Yeah, Ben.
Like a conspiracy theory?
Close, yeah. Yeah, it's a belief system. So you can definitely have an ideology of like whatever conspiracy theory, but it's a belief system. So it's a belief system that humans gravitate towards evil and self-destruction. What does gravitate mean? Yeah, Gianna.
So like,
Yeah. If I'm gravitated towards you, I'm gonna get closer and closer and closer. Yeah. So what that's saying is, it's a belief system that humans like to go towards evil and self-destruction. So it's not a very positive view on humanity, but that is the view that's being taken. It's under the realm of realism, which is basically it's telling it like it is. Like, yeah, sure, there's love and butterflies and you can have a crush on someone, but also there's breakups and heartache and sadness in life, right? So the realism, it's just like there's good, but also there's these really bad things. Humans are fallible, humans make mistakes, which is a good transition into the next part. This genre, it focuses on human fallibility. Now, we've talked about the word fallible before. Jonathan, do you remember what fallible means? No, that's okay. Does somebody else want to help them out? Fallible. We've only discussed it a few times in here. About logical fallacies. Have we done that? Okay. So human fallibility is the human's ability to make mistakes. That's what fallibility is. It's just like your ability to make mistakes.
And nobody's perfect. You're gonna make mistakes because you're human.
Mhm. So it focuses on our human ability, our human ability to make mistakes, to gravitate towards self-destruction, to be judgmental, there we go, punishment, and the psychological effects of guilt and sin. What does psychological mean? Psychological. Have you guys heard that word before, Timothy?
Wait, psychological?
Psychological, yeah.
I'm thinking of the word psycho.
Yeah, it's tied together. Yeah.
Crazy?
Yeah, when you say someone is psycho, it means they're crazy. Yeah, Betty?
Is it like something to do with like your mind?
Yeah, exactly. So, like psychoanalysis, it's the analysis of like the brain, right? So when it says the psychological effects of guilt and sin, it means like the mental effects, the effect it's having on your mental health. So this genre was coming out of a time where America was mostly conservative Christianity, right? And so there's a lot of, like, we're coming out of this very Christian time where there was a lot of judgment because people were making decisions that fell outside of the norm and things were taboo. And so this genre writes a lot about the effects that kind of conservatism had on them and like their new like budding ideas. And so it discusses guilt and sin. Some noteworthy names are Edgar Allan Poe, which we know a little bit more by now, Nathaniel Hawthorne, who wrote this book called The Scarlet Letter, Emily Dickinson, who wrote a lot of poetry. There's Herman Melville, who wrote this book up here called Moby Dick. So all of these are a part of something called the Western Canon, which is a new phrase, I think, to most of you guys. And it's basically any piece of literature, text that we as a Western society deem as important to our culture. So all of these fall under the category of classics, and generally if something is a classic, it is important to our culture, and so it is in our literary canon. All right, so now we're gonna have some time to work with the person next to you. So everybody should be sitting up, reading the questions. You're gonna discuss two different things. The first one is, how does the color scheme and imagery from these book covers impact the mood? And the second question is, by inferring from what you know about Poe, as well as looking at these book covers, identify some other characteristics and themes of dark romanticism. All right, so you're gonna talk in your partner group for a couple of minutes, all right? You can go ahead and start working. I'm gonna be around if you have questions. What about themes or characteristics? Okay. Very good. Something that's that top picture right above it, the whale is going after the almost like only makes you feel anxious, but like even with the gun oh man, it's not going for something good. So yeah, exactly. Somebody else is me, but that's still very good, very good. Alright guys, 30 more seconds to finish this discussion up. You guys have a good discussion? Yeah, awesome. Alright guys, bring it back in. Who wants to share something they said about the mood? Yeah. Like a death romance? What, from this one? Yeah? Kind of interesting with the skeleton and the girl? Yeah.
You can kind of say, like, if you were to look at it, you can think, like, oh yeah, this book is going to be, like, dark and green if you look at the cover that way because of the colors. But if it was, like, if the colors were more, like, brighter, then you think, oh yeah, this is going to be, like, a joyful, happy book.
Yeah. So basically just from looking at these pictures or these covers, you kind of understand the tone that you're going to be reading about. Yeah, very good. Michael?
Scary, like having dead trees.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like it looked like a haunted house.
Yeah, very good. So something me and Jonathan were discussing back there, I was his partner for a minute, is that in this picture, we have a bunch of men chasing this lady, right? And in this picture, it's, you guys see the whale up in the red? There's a whale chasing the ship. Yeah, no, that's a whale. That's a big old whale. Moby Dick is a whale. That's the whale's name.
Oh,
Yeah. Learning something new. And then up here, what's the guy doing? The guy on the horse.
He's meeting another guy because there's a guy outside the banister.
Yeah. Would you say that would you expect that to be a happy meeting? No. So with those three at least, and then this one's just kind of creepy on its own. But those three, it's kind of almost anxiety inducing because you're like, well, there's guys chasing her, there's a whale coming after the ship, and this guy is not going to his happy place. So it's like the opposite of a happy place, right? So you're looking at it, and already just from looking at these pictures, you're like, okay, something bad's about to happen, and I don't really know what it is, but not good. So that's really good. You guys did a great job at identifying some moods. What about any other themes or characteristics? They kind of overlap, but yeah.
Maybe like
Depressed? Yeah. Would you say that Edgar Allan Poe's life impacted that? Yeah? Alright, very good. Anyone else? The themes and the mood, they kind of overlap with something like this, don't they? Well, that was awesome. You guys did answer great by just looking at these pictures, so good job. Alright, so we're gonna do a quick term review. A couple of them you've seen before, or just one of them. So can somebody tell me what imagery is? We did it when we discussed abandoned farmhouse last week. Yeah, Ben.
It's like when the author uses words to describe a situation so you can get a picture of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's when the author uses words to kind of paint a mental image for you. Very good, Ben. All right, symbolism. Yeah, go ahead.
The use of symbols to represent ideas or qualities.
Awesome. Thank you for reading that for us. All right, diction and persona are two new ones. So I want to tell you guys about that. Diction is the writer's choice of words that impact the tone. All right, so with Edgar Allan Poe, he uses words like bleak and ghastly, and that's on purpose. That's not just on accident, right? He's doing it because he wants you to feel a certain way. He wants your mood to be eerie and creepy and kind of dark. And so he uses those words with the intent that the tone will be that darker, kind of mysterious vibe, right? So that's basically word choice. Diction is word choice. Persona is something that's going to be very, very important when we read the poem that we're going to be reading tomorrow. And persona is the identity or character of the speaker or narrator in the text. So in the poem that we're going to be doing tomorrow, the narrator doesn't describe himself, we don't know his name, but we do need to know who he is so we can better understand the rest of the poem. So as we're going to be reading that, we have to think about the persona of this character, even though we don't know too much about him. We don't know how he looks, how old he is, anything like that. But we're going to have to take note of certain things about him so we can fully understand the meaning of the poem. All right, so the poem that we will be reading tomorrow is called Annabel Lee, and it is by Edgar Allan Poe, as you might have guessed. It was published in the New York Tribune on October 9, 1849, 2 days after the death of Edgar Allan Poe. So basically he had written it, he had edited it, he had submitted it, but he never saw it in print because he had died 2 days before it was published. Which is very interesting. Another thing that will be very, very important to remember is that it is believed, the story and poem is believed to be written about his wife who had passed away, Virginia. So as you're going to be reading it tomorrow, just keep that in mind and how we understand that he was very depressed, he was going through a lot, might have been drunk while writing, who knows, but that is something very important to keep in mind. All right. So, what I want you guys to do now is take your packet and on the very front of it, write your name. I don't want to see any no-name papers in the basket today. All right, if you already have your names, then you can open up to the first page. That looks like this. It has a chart on it. All right, so this is what you're going to be doing for a while, all right? You're gonna do number 1, and it says preview the poem by looking at the pictures and title. What do you predict, what will you predict that it will be about? All right, so this is just your opinion based on this picture and the title, Annabel Lee, and maybe some of your context knowledge, who Edgar Allan Poe was, who this poem is written about. What do you think the story will be about? All right, so that's number 1. Number 2 is a KWL chart. Have you guys ever done that? Yeah? one person does, a KWL chart.
No.
So the first box is titled What I Know Now. The second box is What I Want to Know. And the last box is What I've Learned. So what you're gonna do today is you're going to fill out with 3 things each. Box 1, What I Know Now, and box 2, What I Want to Know. Box 1, you can put anything that you've learned about Edgar Allan Poe, about dark romanticism, basically anything that we've discussed today will go in box 1. All right? Box 2 is what you want to know. This is gonna differ from person to person because I don't know what you guys wanna know. So you're gonna tell me 3 things that you are excited to find out. One of them could be, how did Edgar Allan Poe die? Or something along those lines. All right? You're not doing the last box. Box 3, don't touch it. We're going to touch it once we have learned some more about Annabelle Lee, the poem. All right? So don't worry about this box yet. All right? This isn't partner work. This is just individual work. These are opinion questions, so it's just what you think. If you guys have questions, raise your hand and I'll be walking around to help you guys out. All right? All right, you're free to work. Is that a hand? Yeah, you can start the work. for the I want to know box also, this picture is a picture of the story that we're gonna be talking about. So if there's anything that you find intriguing about like that photo, that could be something to write in the something I wanna know, like, why is there a castle? You know, something along those lines. You can use all of your resources to answer these questions. And we'll take about 3 more minutes on this.
So you can, it's basically anything that matters. It could be about the poem, it could be about Edgar Allan Poe, or the genre of like romanticism. Some of you are done, you're doing a great job. Being quiet, make sure you're not flipping the page over. I want the poem to be not a surprise, but a secret until tomorrow. So we'll give everyone about a couple, maybe 3, 4 more minutes, just because I still see a couple of people working. I want as many people to finish as possible. If you guys are done, you can write love notes to your Valentines. Okay, maybe not. Self-love. Alright, so for those of you who are still working, please continue to keep working. I'm gonna be collecting these after class. So that page, other than the box that I asked you not to do, should be complete.
Alright, what we're gonna do now for a few minutes while everybody finishes up is we're gonna go over some vocabulary that we talked about. Alright, so I am going to say a word and then I'm gonna call on somebody to see if they remember what it means. It's not a pop quiz, you're not being graded on this, but these are terms that might show up on the test that we'll be having over these next couple lessons, okay? Alright, so canon. I talked about the Western canon. Who remembers what that is? Yeah, I saw your hand. Something that was used in a war, yes, that is a different version of a canon. What about the literary canon? Think books, yeah.
You said the Western canon is like anything the Western side thought to be like a part of their culture or like that was really important to the literature.
Exactly. It's any piece of text that the Western culture has deemed very important to our culture, our society. So any book that's like considered a classic, like, oh, that's classic work. That would be a part of the literary canon. All right. Let's see. Fallibility. Let's see. Reese, what is fallibility?
The ability to make mistakes.
Yeah. Awesome. You guys are doing great. All right. Ghastly. What is ghastly, Ben?
Scary.
Yeah. Anything invoking a sense of like scared or horror. Very good. Awesome. What about bleak? I know we talked about that earlier. Gianna?
It's like I like have an example.
Give me an example. That works.
It's like when like you wake up and it's like sunny and then like, you don't want to like go outside, you just want to like stay.
Yeah.
And, like, yeah, it's not just
Yeah. Very good. Very, very good. All right. So another word, a synonym for bleak is dreary. So it's just one of those days where it's like, you know, very dreary, inhospitable, charmless. Those are some other synonyms for bleak. All right. Persona. What is persona? Somebody who hasn't answered yet. Chloe, what's persona?
Like an identity.
Yeah, the identity of who specifically, if you remember. No, that's okay. Can anyone help her out? Megan? The narrator, yeah. So whoever is narrating the poem, it's their identity. Awesome, good job, guys. All right, what about diction? That was up on the screen. Diction, somebody who hasn't answered. Michael, do you know what diction is? Do you remember? No? Can somebody help him out? Catherine, do you remember what diction is? No? Okay, this is good. This shows me what we need to go over. What about Brianna? Do you remember what diction is?
I'm trying to remember.
It was like right there on the screen, if you
Yeah.
can imagine it in your head. It's alright, let me read it to you guys and hopefully you'll remember it this time and we can discuss it again tomorrow, so it'll really get stuck in there. Alright, diction is the writer's choice of words. Tone is the writer's attitude in the text, and the connotation of the words used in diction will reveal the tone of the text. So we discussed why Edgar Allan Poe uses words like bleak and dreary, and it invokes the tone, which is, you guys said, eerie and sad and dark, right? So diction is the writer's choice of words. Awesome, very good. What about ideology? You've answered. Let me try and get somebody who hasn't answered yet. Do you remember ideology? It was up, yeah, it was up top. It was on the slide with all the pictures.
It's got a piece of a word, idea, in it. It's something that you
Ben mentioned something along the lines of conspiracy. Do you remember that? You remember him saying that? Kind of. It's okay. Megas, help him out.
It's like something the author explains
Ideology. Yeah, Ben, go ahead, help him out.
It's just basically what people think.
Yeah, very good. It's a belief system, yeah. So some people who adhere to some conspiracy theories, their ideology is along those lines. Very good. All right. What about realism? I mentioned it a little bit on the slide with all the pictures, yeah.
It's like when it's like just the going like the stuff. Like if there's a book talking about like this stuff that's happening right now, I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't give a very clear example of it. What I said up here was it's telling it how it is, right? So realism, the definition is in the arts, so when we're talking about literature, is the attempt to represent subject matter truthfully without artificially avoiding speculative fiction and supernatural elements. So basically it's telling it as it is. It's trying to show people for who they are, with their flaws, but also with the happiness that comes with being a person. All right, so we're gonna be reading our poem tomorrow, Annabelle Lee, and I hope that you guys will like it. Something I mentioned a minute ago, Michael, stop crinkling your paper, is that there's going to be a test on Thursday, all right? We're gonna cover a lot of things in just 3 days. And so what the very first page of your packet is, it's for notes. You're gonna wanna write down things. There's gonna be questions on the test that come directly from these slides, which are going to be on Google Classroom. But over the next couple days, if you wanna jot down notes, or if you wanna go back later tonight or on Wednesday night before the test to refresh your memory, you're gonna need to know some of this information. Okay, I just want you guys to be as prepared as possible. Also, if there's something that doesn't make sense, I'm always here. You can come and ask me. I'm always around. You guys see me in the hallways and stuff. So make sure you're asking, because if you don't ask, then I don't know that you're struggling. All right? So I hope that you have all written your names on the front of the paper. Right? Yeah, we have all done that? Awesome. I want no name papers. That's the last thing I want to see today. All right. So you are going to bring your packets up and put them in this folder. Right there. Yeah, just split it on top. If anyone who hasn't finished, come talk to me and we can work out a time where you can finish your worksheet, okay? If you haven't finished, then come talk to me and we can figure out a time where you can come and finish it. Hang out with me for a little longer.
We still have about 3 or 4 minutes before we're going to line up. So what I'd like for you to also do is very quickly and quietly take out your Chromebook and check PowerSchool and see if you have any missing assignments for ELA that you need to work on during your academic lab, or come to see me about to schedule a makeup of a test or